everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this week's video, I'm going to be making finger puppets. For those of you who don't know, I've been an avid player of Dungeons and Dragons for the past 7 years, 8 years, I don't know, past a long time. I've been very big into role-playing games, and I just thought it'd be fun to recreate some of those characters in finger puppet form so I could act out little scenes with them and, I don't know, feel good, have a fun time. I had a really fun time doing this project, even though it's kind of odd. So hopefully you guys like it, because I really liked it. And also my friend Sierra harassed me for weeks about making this video, so I'm finally doing it for her. So Sierra, if you're watching this, you better be, because it's your fault. So let's hop right into it. Should I get an ASMR? I'd like to tell you all the story of 5 adventurers, most of whom from different times and places, from worlds that are fantastically different from our own, each on a different path of hardship and struggle, plagued by magic and strife. We begin with the story of Alandra. So for our first puppet, I'm going to be making Alandra. So she was the first character I got to play after a couple of years being a forever DM. And when I made Alandra, I truly had one goal in mind. I wanted to be a sexy librarian warlock, and so that's what I did. This version of Alandra that I'm making is her after she got turned into a tiefling after making a deal with Asmodeus. As you tend to do in D&D, you make a deal with the devil and you get changed forever by it. You know how it goes. At the beginning of the game, she was a human, and I actually made a custom doll of that version of her design like a couple of years ago before I was on YouTube, just as like a little birthday gift to myself. This is the outfit I'm trying to recreate in felt for this puppet. This is what she started wearing when she reclassed into a sad girl wizard after her whole family got murked by the big bad. You know how it goes in D&D. So one of Alandra's notable traits is that she has big honkin' bazongas. There's no other way to say it. This wasn't my choice, okay? I asked for the opinion of my other party members of how big do you think Alandra's boobs are, and they said as big as they could possibly be, and I have to give the people what they want. So here I am cutting boobs out of felt, okay? Oh my god. Okay, maybe a little smaller. Okay, this is a much more reasonable. Oh, brother. Okay. Well, we're here now, aren't we? I promise that she had more going for her than just her big pepperonis. Okay, I swear. Over the course of the game, she went on this arc that I think is probably pretty familiar for a lot of warlocks, where she started out kind of in this neutral evil, looking out for herself to amass her own power and kind of stroke her massive ego. And over the course of events, realized that maybe she does care about other people, and maybe, she can get over herself just a little bit. This is so stupid. God This is so dumb. Honestly, who am I kidding? She never really got over herself, but she did learn how to care for other people, and so that's still a big step up. Does getting back with your ex-boyfriend count as getting over yourself? Like a little bit? I'm asking for her. So for a little background on that, prior to the events of the game, she went to boarding school and entered a very tense and sort of romantically charged academic rivalry with another student there. This guy's name was Desirek, and yes, I came up with his name by adding an extra syllable to Derek. That might be a fact that my other people in my group don't know, but they know now if they're watching this video. Desirek's name is just Derek, but with a Z in there. Anyway, she and Desirek were always trying to vie for like the top spot in their class, you know, have like the best grades, the best test scores, all that sort of stuff. And so she started inviting herself to his room under false pretenses in order to like steal his coursework, to sabotage his grades. But unfortunately, these false pretenses eventually became, you know, real. She's like, oh no, I'm actually catching feelings for this guy I'm trying to just manipulate. So moving forward, she was like, okay, I'm gonna stop stealing his stuff. I'm just gonna be his girlfriend. It'll be normal. And, you know, we're gonna move forward playing fair and square. Fast forward to when they graduate, all said and done, Desirek ends up taking the top spot in their class, and she goes to congratulate him, and he takes that moment to be like, I know you're stealing my coursework. Guess what? I broke in and I tampered with your test scores, and that's why you lost. And instead of explaining that she had stopped sabotaging him and that, like, she really did have feelings, she just left. She just left. Because she's like, I lost, I'm heartbroken, I was this close to swallowing my pride, but it turns out that I'm dumb. I could have just kept sabotaging him, and then it would have actually been fair, because that's how that works, right? If you sabotage each other, it's like PIMDOS, it cancels each other out. So fast forward another 10 years, you know, she's working in a library in the big fantasy city that she lives in, and one of the new books that they get in starts like whispering things to her when she's there late at night working. She answered its call and became a tome-packed warlock, and that set her on this journey that led her to finding out that after school, after graduation, Desirek joined a cult. Joined a doomsday cult. Not just joined it, he was one of its 5 leaders, as he had become this like vampire warlock general of this like imperialist army. And the TLDR, because we can't be here all day, is that through some investigation, and by investigation I mean Alandra was briefly sleeping with his wife, and that's a whole different story. But anyways, she found out from her that Desirek was sort of reluctant in all of this, you know. Being a leader in a doomsday cult wasn't really his plan for his life. And so with that information, she was able to sort of like appeal to that, and we sort of power of friendshiped his ass, and he ended up joining our side, and he was just with us the rest of the way as we were taking down the rest of this cult and any other bad guys. There were so many bad guys in that game. So many things happened. But in the end, we ran away from our problems because there was just too many of them. So we literally got in a spaceship and left. That's how that game ended. But anyway, that's it for Alandra. Next, we have the story of Maurice, a sad and lonely elf detective caught in a world that is unfamiliar to her. So Maurice was my sad lesbian elf detective who I was actually playing at the same time that I was playing Alandra. So on Wednesdays I'd be like this charismatic bisexual warlock, and on Sundays I was the most just sour and curmudgeonly lesbian you've ever seen in your life. In her defense, I think she had plenty of good reasons to be. So Maurice was a high elf who was raised by humans. And so very early in her life, her adoptive parents just died of old age because that's what happens. And because she was raised around them, she had a very human mindset. So even though in elf years she was really young, she had the brain of a human who is well into their 50s and had a hard life and is kind of over it. After her parents died, she moved to the big city and started working at this sort of crummy diner where she met a waitress named Karina. And in classic tragic backstory fashion, they were in love, they got married, and very shortly afterwards, Karina got murdered. It's what happens. The circumstances surrounding her death were very mysterious, and very quickly the case went cold and the town guard just dropped it. And it was this moment that made Maurice decide to pursue becoming a homicide detective because she didn't want anyone else to feel the way she was feeling right now. So fast forward a couple decades, she becomes a detective, she gets remarried, and eventually has a kid. And after she has a child, it sort of sent her on this spiral. She becomes more and more haunted by the fact that they never found Karina's killer, and she's just so worried that she's going to come home one day and her family is going to be gone, because that's sort of what happened with Karina. So she started drinking and resorting to very unethical measures to try to find Karina's killer just to bring herself some peace. And in this pursuit, she became a person that her wife couldn't really be with anymore, so they got divorced. It was all just downhill from there. Now that she had alienated herself from her family, all she really had was this pursuit. The clues led her to this land that had been ruined by some magical calamity, and when she went to go investigate, she was swallowed by the mists and ended up in Barovia, which is a place that may be familiar to some of you. She was on that Curse of Strahd shit, okay? After landing in the mists, it was a very we're not in Kansas anymore moment, and she was sort of forced to ally herself with people who had very questionable morals for the sake of survival. Among them was a very mysterious masked woman who had entered the mist in search of her child. Upon finding out that this woman was a mother, Maurice became very invested in keeping her as safe as possible, which was fairly difficult considering the fact they're in a land of vampires and monsters and other various horrible creatures. And it was made even more complicated by the fact that Maurice eventually found that this woman was an assassin. She killed people for a living, and that's kind of the opposite of Maurice's whole bag. I don't know why I keep saying this woman. Her name was Myra, and this game very quickly for myself and Myra's player became the sort of slow burn enemies to lovers game. That's yeah, there was monsters, yeah, there was things happening, but for us the game was about these two MILFs falling in love with each other, okay? And I wouldn't have it any other way. And just to complicate matters more, Maurice found out that this sort of obsidian ring that was found on Karina's body when she died, she'd never put it on. And when she did, she discovered that this ring housed Karina's soul. And once she put it on, she was able to communicate with Karina beyond the grave. And Karina, over time, was able to sort of see and feel more of what Maurice was seeing and feeling. And so imagine, if you will, your ex-wife died, 40 years ago. It's been a long time. You've had time to sort of heal, kind of. And you meet this other woman and you're starting to have these very complicated feelings about it that you already feel bad about because she kills people for a living. And then you find out that this woman that you loved has been just watching you fall in love with someone else the whole time. It's bad. It's messed up, dude. Also, a quick note about what I'm doing here. I'm making a little cigarette prop for the Maurice puppet because one of her notable traits is that she was a chain smoker because she's a noir detective. She needs to smoke. And I do not advocate the use of tobacco products. Kids, don't smoke. It was okay for her to do it because she's not real and also an elf, so she can't get sick from it. Fast forward, and eventually Maurice is able to free Karina's spirit from the ring so that she can have like a proper peaceful afterlife. And she and Myra were able to eventually escape the mists and reunite with Myra's son and just go home and live a mostly peaceful life and sort of live as happily ever after as they can, despite the gap in their life expectancies, because Myra was also a human. But you know, they adopted a bunch of kids, and Maurice just sort of made it her life's mission to take care of them and their descendants or whatever. Next, we have the story of Zur and Naya, two adventurers whose paths merged into one as they went along their journey. So sorry to break the continuity of this video, but the Zur puppet was actually the first one I made for this project. That's why I'm using my finger as a guide to make his body instead of using the mysterious green template that I was using for the rest of the video. So Zur was a half-orc rogue that I played after Alandra with that same group once that previous campaign had concluded. And won't you know it, Zur was a really sad guy too. I enjoy playing characters that are having a really bad time. So in the setting that I played Zur in, orcs had a very xenophobic and isolated culture. And so you can imagine being a half-orc in that setting wasn't very fun. There's only one city-state in the entire region that he was from that even allowed in outsiders, and his mother lived there briefly and had a fling with an outsider, got pregnant, and then had to go back home to her little village that was not nearly so accepting of that sort of choice, you know. So he was raised in an environment where he was very looked down upon, and fast forward, you know, a couple of decades, his mother gets really sick and they're really poor, and so he goes back to the city to try to make some money to hire a healer to save his mom. Well, unfortunately, even in the sort of slightly more accepting city, it's very difficult to get work there as a half-orc, so he was very hard-pressed to find a job that would make enough money and time before his mom would just keel over, you know? So he decided to seek out the very illegal underground gambling dens in the city in a desperate attempt to earn more money. One of Zur's notable traits is that he was incredibly perceptive and insightful. Like, his stats were really off the charts in that area. And because we started the game at a sort of later level, we decided that even prior to the start of the game, he had, you know, pretty gnarly abilities in that area. So, being a guy who is naturally very adept at reading people, he was able to perform very well in the sort of fantasy poker stuff that he was getting up to because he could look at someone and tell if they were lying. So, some good news is he was able to make enough money to hire a healer for his mom. The bad news is he wasn't able to do that before he caught the attention of the sort of orc mafia that ran these gambling dens. And basically the king of the orc mafia was like, hey, if you want to keep gambling here, you're gonna have to work for me because you're really good and we could really use your skill set. And at the time, Zur still needed money, and so he's like, well, guess I'm joining the orc mob now. I guess that's just what my life is. So he makes enough money, he sends a healer back to his mom, but he can't go home because now he has sort of pledged his fealty here, and if he were to go home, they would just, you know, follow him and send someone to kill him or whatever the orc mob does. So fast forward another few years, he spends a while working for the Orc Mafia until he accidentally does a big ol' booby. Booby? No! Not booby. A blunder. A boo-boo. Bro. Anyway, he messes up real bad and loses a whole heaping helping of gold on behalf of the Orc Mafia. And so the king is like, hey, you need to go earn this money back because you lost a bunch of money. Why do I feel like I'm getting dumber the longer this this voiceover goes on? Anyway, so to earn this money back, he needs to leave the country because this Orc Mafia has so much power and influence over that region that he's like, basically any money that you make in this country is money that I already have a claim to, so you need to go somewhere else to go do it. So he leaves the country, goes and starts looking for work and takes up adventuring, and that is where he meets the party and they start on their little adventure, dude. The thing about our Wednesday campaigns is that they all end up being like at least a year long each. And so much stuff happens in them. I can't give you like a full breakdown, but some of the highlights of their little adventure are as follows. So at some point, the whole party becomes religious fugitives, and while we were on the run, one of the members of our party, Holg Warpo, a gnome inventor whose personality was dad. He was the dadliest dad you'd ever seen. He was like, oh, we could go back to my gnome country because they don't have those laws there, and my fiance is the princess, I think, was his deal. So they went to the gnome kingdom. When they got there, everything was messed up, dude. Like, there was zombies everywhere and like these weird bugs. Like, it was really weird and gross. And at a certain point, we were fighting this like really gnarly bug mage. There's zombies everywhere. This mage is so powerful. Like, we're truly barely holding on to life because we started the combat by like driving a car into a horde of zombies and like setting off a bomb. So I think we like started off being like down HP, and I think some of our party members were like already unconscious because we blew ourselves up to kill a bunch of zombies. And we're running around trying to avoid getting murked by this bug mage. And at a certain point, Zur was sort of like faced with this choice of either like trying to save Holg or trying to save Naya because he couldn't really carry both of them, but he decided to go for it anyway. So he manages to like save both of them. And like each turn of this combat was like these split-second decisions that like had us narrowly avoiding death. And in the heat of this, like, truly, like, 4-hour-long battle, like, I don't know, dude, that session was, like, 7 hours long. In the heat of this, like, these things happened within, like, 12 seconds of each other, okay? Zur kisses Naya in the heat of the moment because he's like, I think we're all toast. And afterwards, like, Holg teleported him into the car so that he wouldn't get like torn apart by a bunch of zombies, and shortly after saving him, Unica, our DM, because we were like making jokes the whole game of like, what if Holg was Zur's dad, because Zur didn't know who his dad was. And Holg had a thing about like when he was in college, he was like a wild party guy. So in the heat of this battle, Boudica was like, Holg, you look at Zur and you see features that, you know, harken back to your own, and made it canon that Holg was Zur's dad. And so we had that reveal, and so part of this campaign became like basically this road trip of this father trying to connect and make up for the lost time with his estranged son that he didn't know that he had, his estranged son who was 3 feet taller than him. Alright, so while I was telling that story, we've moved on to making Naya. So Naya was a tiefling bard. She was formerly a pirate, but gave that up after her dad got by like an aboleth or something. And early in the game, it became very apparent that Naya had like a little crush on Zur, and Zur, being a very perceptive guy, you know, he picked up on that. But he didn't really know what to do about it because the culture he comes from was very like stuffy and conservative, especially in the matters of courtship and romance and things. And also, being a half-orc, like, all of his peers were sort of told to keep their distance from him, and he didn't really get to have any experience in that sort of front until he joined the mafia, where rules were a little bit more lax. But even so, they didn't really see him as like a person, you know. He wasn't treated very well, so he wasn't used to having somebody just like him, you know. So it was very cute. Naya was very into soap. She just had this little obsession with soap, and so like she gave him a bar of soap that she had carved into a little heart, and he's like, thank you. He had never really gotten a gift before, and he's like, okay, I have to be polite, I have to get her something. And so the start of this thing where he would like carve little figurines out of soap and give them to her, and it was very cute. And as I stated earlier, they had their first kiss in the heat of almost being killed by zombies. And so it was very awkward afterwards because Zur was like, I was really sure that I was like gonna die and not have to deal with the ramifications of this, but we lived. And so now I have to do like the awkward thing of like talking about what happened and like, what are we? I'm sure you guys are starting to notice this trend with my characters where basically any character that I'm playing in a long-term campaign usually ends up doing like a romantic plot because it's something I really enjoy. I think that romance in D&D is a lot of fun because it like heightens the emotional stakes of what's going on, because you're not just like, your characters aren't just risking their lives anymore, they're also watching somebody that they're like in love with risking their life and like running into that like bleed over of like, okay, what is us having a disagreement as coworkers and what bleeds into our relationship. And you know, I just think it's fun. It makes it a little bit more like messy and complicated when you throw that into the mix, you know. And this is the first campaign that Sierra had joined our Wednesday group, and so it was a nice way to get to know her more because we would talk more outside of the game about Zur and Naya and their relationship and, you know, how we wanted to make our Barbies kiss or whatever. And so that was a lot of fun, and I have a lot of very fond memories of making their little thing happen. I think the Naya puppet actually took the longest of any of the ones I make for this project, just because it's just a little bit more complex than the rest, and I do her hair in a way that you'll see in a little bit that took me literally like 2 hours. It made me insane. And because this was the longest puppet in the process, I'm going to take this moment to say that if you watched this far and you liked this video, consider liking it. It really helps me out a lot. And if you want to see more things from me, consider subscribing. I do stuff like this, a little creative art videos. It's usually doll stuff, but sometimes I like to change it up. Truly, if you got 30 minutes into this video, I'm sure you're in it for the long haul, and I appreciate that. So I want to take a minute to talk about her hair, because literally it made me miserable. So I cut a base shape out of felt, but I wanted her to have her sort of curly hair texture because that to me is very iconic of Naya. So in order to achieve that, I took individual pieces of embroidery thread and coated them in Mod Podge, and glued them down to where her hair parts, and one at a time shaped them to get these little curly shapes in her hair to add this like texture. And I did that one at a time for however many strands I end up doing. And don't do it. Don't do it. It made me so upset, but I think it came out pretty cool. I did a majority of this process off camera, and I also make another piece in the front to sort of, frame her face and do the hairs that pass in front of her horns, but you'll see it when it gets there. Honestly, it was really fun having to figure out new techniques and like what to do to get the looks that I wanted out of these materials, because I'd never made finger puppets before. So even though it made me want to pull my hair out, I had a really good time. So back to Zur and Naya. Their story has a happy ending. Zur rises to become the king of the orc mafia, and then rises beyond that to become a legitimate political figure in his region and start, enacting positive change and things like that. He and Naya get married, they have kids, they are lavishly wealthy, and, have a great time. And the evil necromancer lady that we are trying to stop over the course of the campaign eventually stopped doing evil stuff because she started dating Naya's mom. And after Naya got pregnant, Naya's mom was like, well, we don't want to kill you now because you're going to have my grandbaby. And so through the power of family, all things were resolved.
It was nice, though.
I agree. I would have been upset if I did get eviscerated by zombies and I had not taken the chance on it.
Be pretty upset too. I'm glad you didn't get eviscerated by zombies.
Who knows how the next few weeks will go. Perhaps I will still get my chance.
Yeah, perhaps.
To get eviscerated by zombies.
I'm sorry. Yeah, of course that's what you're talking about.
And finally, we have the tale of Amelia, an unfortunate snakefolk woman whose story has yet to reach its end. So finally, to round out this bunch, we have Amelia, who is a Yuan-Ti wizard who I'm playing in our current Wednesday game. Because this campaign is set in a sort of American Western inspired setting, we decided to call Yuan-Ti snakefolk just to fit with the vibe a little better. To continue with that vibe, Amelia was born in a dusty desert trail town called Dead River. Amelia is one of those people who was like born studious, and so her mom and her aunt saved up money, that way they can send her off to a nice fancy wizard university. So by the time she was 19, they were ready to send her off to the big city to go expand her horizons and, make a good future for herself. Shortly after she arrived there, she met a young man named Elias, who very quickly took an interest in her. He was sort of odd and mysterious, and none of their other classmates really knew much about him, but he had a charm about him that appealed to Amelia, and he was always very keen to talk about her potential and what he saw in her. And unfortunately, Amelia had just the right combination of anxiety and low self-esteem that this really worked on her, okay? Anyways, fast forward, they enter a relationship, and over time, more and more red flags are being raised, okay? He's very jealous and possessive and gets very upset when she wants to hang out with her other friends. Textbook, not a great guy stuff, And in the middle of all this, people at their school are also going missing. Amelia's having these horrible nightmares about their various classmates being taken by this giant demonic being. And while this is happening, Elias is also working on a project that he won't really let her in on, that he's like, oh, I'll tell you about it when the time is right. And so fast forward to when the time is right, he sort of takes her into this room on campus, and when she gets there, you know, there are other students there that he had been working with, as well as this massive mirror. And they do this ritual, and summoned into the reflection of this mirror is the same demonic entity that she'd been seeing in her dreams. And when she sees this, she puts together that Elias was the one who has been sacrificing their classmates to this demonic entity. And the other thing that really tipped her off to this is that a lot of the students that went missing were her friends. So it's like, oh, babe, oh, you can't hang out with me tonight? That's cool. I'm just gonna murk your friends, and then you don't have anyone else to hang out with. It's not good. It was very, very bad. To make matters worse, around this time, Amelia started to suspect that she was pregnant. So she's like, I need to get out of here, because if this guy finds out that I'm carrying his baby, he will never let me leave. He will do something nuts to make sure I stay here. So she left in the middle of the night, just sort of left a note and was like, hey, I'm sorry, I can't help you do your evil magic. I gotta go. So she goes home, she has her baby, and she spends the next couple of years just kind of living in fear. And she starts having these dreams of Elias, like, coming and taking their child away. And she's like, I can't keep living like this. So she's like, hey, Mom, can you watch your grandchild so I can go and do a little murder quest to kill my baby daddy? That would be pretty cool. And so that's where she entered the game. That's where she starts this campaign on a quest to kill Elias. As the game went on, it became revealed that Elias had sort of recruited every notable antagonist from everybody's backstories to join his little crew, his little League of Evil Exes, as we've been calling it. And this crew has two major goals in mind. One is to help Elias rise to this, like, arcane demigodhood in order to participate in this holy war that's coming up. And the other seems to be just to make our lives as miserable as possible. Like, sometimes it really just feels petty. But you know, that's a big bad for you. And because I had mentioned previously that every character that I play in a long-term campaign ends up with some sort of romantic subplot, she is no exception. You know, she's currently dating a ghostwriter, spirit of vengeance cowboy, just, you know, to keep it spicy. Amelia really looked at this guy who's like, I used to be an outlaw and I have so much innocent blood on my hands, but I feel really bad about it. And she was like, this guy would be an excellent stepdad to my child. You know? And I don't think she's wrong, okay? I don't think she's wrong for that. Duke, you know, may have a complicated past, but he's a good guy. I don't know, it's so funny to me. She's like, dude, hear me out, okay? Also, I feel like in fantasy 1845 or whatever, there isn't a lot of career paths available for poor young men, okay? Either you're like working in a coal mine or your dad is recruiting you to join his gang of train robbers, okay? So you can't blame him. He's a victim of circumstance. And as I've said, this game hasn't reached its conclusion yet, so I don't know how their stories are going to end. If they're going to be able to best Elias, if they're going to fall victim to some other horrible thing that's gonna happen, you know? I don't know, but I have my fingers crossed for like a nice, pleasant, happily ever after where Amelia can finally live a normal life, because that's all she really wants. And with that, all of our stories are complete. that's it for this video. I hope to see y'all next time. Love you, bye! Just a move. I feel like I'm getting rated like